Good morning all and welcome back to the ANZ Hearthstone Open presented by Blizzard and AEL. We've made it to the Western Conference and for this week we'll be running a round robin to pick out what this player pool can do. I'm Mendrix and joining me today of course is the wonderful Bard. Mate, what's new?
Oh, not very much, Mendrix. Obviously, at this point, we're quite settled into this season of AEL Hearthstone Open, so I'm expecting just sort of a normal, refined afternoon of Hearthstone enjoyment, average Hearthstone enjoyer here, and I'm expecting to see something a little bit different. WA, you know, it's a bit removed from the rest of the country, so I'm expecting a slightly different flavor, but on the whole, just more of that same good esports action we've been loving this whole month.
Absolutely, I too am very excited to jump into it. And well, before we do break down everything that's happening, we do need to throw a little bit of love to our sponsors. So of course, all of our highlights today are brought to you by McDonald's Australia. Shout out, I'm loving it in chat to capture your favorite moments and catch them all at the end of the show on Twitter. And of course, Mate and Internet Mobile, throw it into the chat, hashtag Let's Be Mates, and be in the running to win 2 card packs valued at $3.95. And make sure you upgrade your internet and mobile today with Mate and Internet Mobile. So, Bard, first up to the play, I believe, is going to be Farbs versus Blitz. Have you had a chance to have a quick look at what cards or what decks they're going to be running this time around?
I've just checked it out now. Also, we're seeing the bans come through. Again, disappointingly, Priest gets banned. It seems to happen all too often, but I am appreciating that, yeah, whether it's because of the meta evolving week to week or just because of that regional meta game being different from the start, we are seeing some different, more aggressive options to, I feel like, what we've been seeing in the last couple of weeks, right? Our previous qualifiers have begun to drift, you know, away from the very start of this expansion when we started out the Open with stuff like Imp Warlock being very prominent, to more and more so people playing Control, Ramp, one-hit combo, Miracle Rogue, Quest Hunter, this sort of stuff. Lots and lots of minion-based decks today, including in this matchup. So looking forward to seeing some Beast Druid. Also looking forward to see a slightly different take on the Imp King deck, how that's evolved as we sort of started to see it shift away from its original form to kind of combat the counter meta that rose up. That's what I'm kind of looking for most out of these players.
Yeah, that Beast aggro Druid that seems to be up, you know, like, well, basically has like run up the ranks now, is actually on top of the win rate for the open ladder at the moment. It's actually one of the strongest decks coming into it. So no surprise now all of a sudden that all the players from the Western Conference have actually brought it around. I believe everyone is running some sort of Druid variant. So pretty interesting in that sense. Could be interesting how it does play out. Of course, the Imps still are here to play. Most of the Warlocks that are going to be available in this deck lineups between the players are also running that Imp King Warlock variant as well. So very aggro decks coming into it. Even that Priest that has been banned away is actually more of that, I believe it is more of a Thief Priest coming into the mix. So a little bit of differences already on the horizon here in the Western Conference. So pretty excited to see how that all plays out. Now, what do you expect is probably going to happen going into this matchup here? Because we've got those aggro druids. I reckon those two are going to be like the real things that butt heads.
Yeah, well, the aggro druid list, obviously in that mirror, it is quite, you know, it's one of those things that's more of a coin flip. Aggro decks, typically you don't have that many cards which are sort of niche interactive, maybe 1 or 2 tech pieces if the player's adventurous, but because so many cards just, they trade with each other on rate, if it's not exactly the same card, it does come down to maybe who hits a slightly better curve, or who has just the right amount of damage on board to get a clearer trade and board clear on their opponent, and this kind of small advantage in the early game can snowball quickly. But I don't think we're going to be seeing a mirror necessarily in our very first match, because Farbs is actually lacking in the Druid department. We do have an Imp Warlock on that side, so no disappointment there, but it looks like the third deck is going to be that Miracle Rogue that we keep seeing different variants of. At this point, it feels like every Rogue deck is just kind of blended together into some beautiful soup of Death Rattle and Miracle, and, you know, I guess we haven't seen any Quest Rogue, but besides that, it sort of feels like you can pick and choose cards from any of these sort of nebulous archetypes, and you end up with the, you know, same kind of kills off of the same kind of legendaries, Edwin, Necrolord, Draka, and that Sinstone Graveyard, one of the most powerful locations in the new expansion.
I'm glad you picked it up for a second there. I'm like, oh, wait, is that a demon? I literally got done in already off the bat of it, and you're like, yeah, this rogue deck's coming into it. I'm like, yes, that Masquerade card. It got me once again.
It's one of those.
But yeah, very quick here from Blitz here, we can see that it's just literally going to be those Druid cards coming on in. The Druid of the Reef, of course, but gets played out, immediately dropping some saplings as well. So a very quick board coming into the mix. And of course, you do want to just put out some crazy pressure against this Miracle Rogue before they have a chance to actually realize their combination and put a very big Edwin Van Cleef onto the board.
Yeah, I mean, the big Edwin Van Cleef has always been, like, it's such a classic rogue thing to do, but that, like I just said, there are other threats as well that are even harder to deal with. In particular, that Necrolord Draka, which we haven't seen drawn yet, but which creates a powerful weapon that's very large instead of Edwin. A lot of decks, if they're not mage with that freezing power, really struggle to deal with basically 2-turn lethal from the auto attacks of the rogue class. And that Sinstone Graveyard creating a stealth minion is all important, right? Sometimes you even get a stealth Edwin, depending on how you can sequence your spells in the turn. And we just haven't seen as many decks in this season, I think, compared to last season, that can really effectively answer that stealth board. There's not a lot of board clearing going on, not even that much taunt, although this Druid deck probably better equipped than most. And you can see right here, it's going to be sort of a test of these aggro decks, because we haven't been seeing them previously. I believe that's because most players do not rate the ability of aggro to race a sort of more combo deck like this Rogue, or to indeed get under something like that Skeleton Mage, which is just an aggro killer. But, Blitz believes, and, at least one of our other competitors today also does believe in the Beast Druid, so we'll see how we go here. This early Sinstone Graveyard, though, going to be good, whether or not you want to race or trade, just getting really, really sick value out of it. It is worth noting that you can only use it, like, every second turn, so it takes a little bit longer, but you're still getting huge stat payoffs on board for your plays, and that's something this Rogue deck does need to hit, because it has so much air in it, Mendrix.
But you can see already off the bat here for Farbs is when we've actually seen this Miracle Rogue deck in play, normally we're getting much bigger ghosts. The combinations are looking to get towards that 7 mark, that 8 mark. You can see Farbs is already feeling a little bit of the pressure that Blitz is putting out there. As you can see, a pretty wide board already starting to come to it in turn 3. And has decided to go, yep, you know what, I much rather have that 3/3 body a little bit earlier. Yes, I'm not getting the greatest value out of the Sinstone Graveyard, but at least I'm starting to keep myself alive. And of course, I will have my Edwin, I will have that Necrolord, as you were mentioning before, as my way to close out this match. But Blitz is still continuing to pile on that pressure. It's going to throw down that Thornguard Turtle as well, and already the damage is beginning to pile up. Yeah, it's only 1 hit, but 1 hit's time and time again has brought him down to 22 HP for Farbs.
Yeah, I mean, whenever you're playing against this Druid deck, you're sort of seeing them mount a larger and larger board. It's usually very hard to clear, especially for a deck like this Rogue. You don't really want to be stabbing away at those minions with your dagger. So you're just waiting for one of the team buffing spells to come through, and unfortunately, you can see them both in hand there. Power of the Wild and Pride's Fury both available, right? And so it's sort of, how greedy does the Druid deck want to get, or feel they're safe to get before they, in terms of widening their board, before they apply the multiplicative power of one of those spells, and then it's really just a 1 or 2 turn lethal from there. And Farbs, at this point when you say board this wide and no buff yet, you're kind of hoping, well, maybe they missed on it, because it's not like the deck necessarily has a ton of draw power if you can't like stick a peasant to correct missing on those buff spells. And if you don't have them, then having a board of 1 power minions really isn't good enough in a lot of situations. Unfortunately, the odds are in the favor of the Druid to have at least one of them by this point in the game, and you can see that's available. So despite the good decision-making by Farbs, I'm going to give some credit here. I think it is an upside of the deck that you can run out that Sinstone Graveyard early, especially when you can play it out on turn 3 and have a 3/3 ghost. That's not inconsiderable, right? It's just the flexibility of your late game threat or combo card also being able to help defend you in the early game. The problem is it just might not be enough, even with that help. We can see there's the buff landing, gets 4 times value. You sort of think of that as a pretty good conversion rate from your 4 mana spell. And now, suddenly, that's twice as much damage as you were taking a turn ago. You were impressed by the 1 damage against Mendrix. Check out 2 damage.
It definitely
that's crazy. Slow down there, kid.
Well, at the same time, Blitz does slow it down. Doesn't go straight to the face with all of those numbers.
It's time. Okay, it's time. He's Edwin.
Yeah, but Edwin is dropping down as well, as you mentioned before. So now happy to make that play. Let's see how big this Edwin can get, because Farbs is definitely beginning to pile on those cards and continuing to draw.
Okay, decides to continue that. Interesting choice to go. I mean, like, obviously it's fairly free, and it lets you keep the Edwin chain going, but, like, I guess your choice is, like, you probably don't feel threatened to die from 18. I guess your life's just high enough, and especially when you find a second Wild Paw Null, it kind of makes it all better. These really are such a powerful card in the deck. I mean, you can kind of tell, because you go through the whole rigmarole of fooling the casters and playing Necrolord Draka, and even potentially delaying your first real play of the game, just to make sure that you add a few more off like sort of quote-unquote off-class cards to your hand, and get these 0-cost nulls coming through. Without that, this turn would look completely different, and Farbs would probably be out of the game. Instead, suddenly the tables are flipped.
Yeah, looking very strong here now for Farbs as well. Also has that Necrolord in hand as well, so that's have the opportunity to get to sum up an even stronger direct hit into the onto the road directly. But now you're looking at Blitz. Blitz doesn't really have that much gas. Yes, that Power of the Wild is nice. I mean, Natural Causes is there, but when you staring down the barrel of 2 9/9 bodies and 2 3/3s, yeah, you can really tell that the corner has well and truly turned here for Farbs.
Yeah, and this is kind of the problem with not just the Beast Druid, right, but a lot of the more aggressive decks in the format right now. It's not that we haven't really been seeing much of them in the open, but it's not that they don't exist. You know, those decks, those options are out there. But this is the problem they run into a lot, right? You can steal games from people. You can have games that look tremendously good for you. If they can't answer you early on, then they just give it up. But if you fall behind, especially on a deck like Beast Druid, you don't really have a comeback mechanic. Like I said, you don't really have ways to draw cards. Your individual cards themselves are not very powerful. You can basically get one really nice, strong board out of your buffs. If you're lucky and you got one of the interactions that lets you draw cards, depending on how deep you go on cards like Peasant, or I think it's the Mad Cook is the other card draw engine most of them run. But it is a little bit costlier in mana, so some decks choose to cut that as well. And then if you don't have either of those, and they happen to have enough cards to answer your early board, it's just all over. And especially when half your opponents have 40 life, it seems like more often than not they do run out of gas, right? I actually went on and playtested in the last week some of these aggro decks, one because they're pretty cheap to make on your own account. That's one advantage of them. I think, as you said, this high win rate Beast Druid, Token Druid list is like also insanely low dust cost. Basically, you can have it straight away if you open a Hearthstone account. And you know, it has a decent win rate, but mostly what it does is wins and loses games very fast. So it's good for grinding. Yeah. Not from winning 100% of its matches at all. You will definitely lose a lot of games if it bricks. And even compared to other aggro decks like the Imp King Warlock, or even stuff like Aggro Paladin, the Quest Paladin, the Naga Priest deck, all of those have better ways to draw cards. Whereas at this point, you can see Blitz kind of committing druidic seppuku there, just casting natural forces to his own face. So yeah, if you're wondering why we're just off on a tangent, it's because that game is kind of garbage time at that point. Yeah, it
had definitely run its course. Blitz knew it as well at that moment in time. Was actually just sitting there playing the cards out, and you just had no answers with everything like that. Even waiting for the draw. Sometimes you see that draw card and you go, yeah, this is going to do nothing for me at that moment in time. That's literally what Blitz was feeling.
You get the mulligan, you're like, not working out today.
Yeah, again, staring down the barrel of 2 9/9s around turn 5. Definitely well played there by Farbs. I understood exactly what needed to be done, was able to weather the storm. I was happy to trade out that HP early just to clear the board away, because that was the only real chance for Blitz to get back into it. If those minions stay up, they just continue to get buffed, and that cumulative power does, like you were saying before, gets to a point where you just have 2 or 3 turn lethals. But I never let that happen. Made sure there was going to be some early ghosts on board, made sure to use that pressure wisely just to sort of buckle off a little bit, and then made enough time to get to that Edwin. So very well played there by Farbs to take that first match, but that does mean that, of course, the Warlock now needs to win, and it looks like Blitz wants to go once again with that Druid.
Yeah, I mean, you may as well try and get the Druid through, like we said, wins or loses games quickly, and if you don't get that dub, then, you know, you weren't waiting around potentially playing out a whole set just to see the Druid go brick. But we're hoping that's not the case, because I do want to see this is a real deck. Like, it's not as though Blitz just sort of like is trying out something experimental. Like we said, this deck wins a lot. It's just, it tends to have very good games and very bad games, and that's, for some players, that's what they want. For me, I like to feel like I'm always in the game. It really disheartens me when I have draws like that last one. You just feel helpless, and not just helpless, like you have no meaningful cards to play. You're just drawing like one cost card a turn and putting it on the board and going, well, this obviously doesn't do anything. Have a go, kill me. Like that just gnaws at my gut, which is why I prefer decks like this aggro Warlock, right? And in fact, especially this particular build, this appears to be the Curse Imp Warlock, right? Kind of a hybrid of the Imp Warlock, like just the straight up Imp Warlock with full aggro, right? People have been trying it for ages, but it runs into a similar problem as the Druid. Like, especially if you cannot hit Impending Catastrophe in the early game, you can run out of cards and it slows you down enough that you just get run over. Especially if they can clear the board, right? It's kind of like very reassuring. Your opponent, any good player, will feel so much more comfortable in their decision making if your deck is one-dimensional. If you know all I have to do is stop them getting minions on the board at all costs, it will always hurt them more to clear away all their imps than it will hurt me to spend any number of cards doing that. then you can just kind of autopilot all your decision making. Whereas a deck like this, with the Abyssal Curses, suddenly they have reach, right? Suddenly you need to be concerned, even after you clear the board, like, well, you know, if I spend my win condition to do that, is it going to slow me down enough that the curses get me? Am I able to, you know, hit with my face on their minions instead of trading my own minion for board control, when that might be the difference between dying to drag below or not? And just knowing that these are a factor in the game can complicate things. Having a 3/4 body, also pretty cool, right? You don't have to play some of the clunkier imps that the previous incarnations of the deck did.
Yeah, you can see how Blitz does need to think through, of course, the next set in terms of what needs to be played. That peasant is really nice, but typically when we're dropping it down, when you have a nice taunt minion on board, just to give it a little bit of extra protection, and of course when you want to draw some additional cards in the back end. But Blitz does have enough gas here that I imagine probably wants to just continue to pile on that pressure. Wouldn't be surprised if like Call of Fury Adept comes in just to be able to clear out Syracuse Cultist a little bit early, but Blitz is thinking through a different line at the moment. Look, he's thinking about perhaps playing the peasant that's coming around instead, and then we'll also still throw that Call of Fury Adept. So nice big damage coming off the board here. Will of course clear things out just a little bit there. Unfortunately, he's going to be able to, of course, get that extra bit of hit in the end now. I like how I actually timed that. Obviously, take a little bit of damage myself, because of course I'm going to have all the aggro druids coming into the mix regardless. But now this is going to be all a very big buff board with that little bit of extra immunity coming into play. So this does mean that they will survive a little bit longer while he continues to draw out some cards, and you can see that Planet Evidence coming in as well. Farbs very quick, just wanted some imps on board for a bit of protection, so it's right back to Blitz again.
Yeah, definitely worth thinking about, right? And that's what's so interesting about having these two aggro decks, is it's like turn 3 and they're already tanking, is when your cards are all this cheap, you actually do have like a very meaningful set of options, even on the early turns, right? So like on that last turn, do you go for the peasant play and do you protect it with Thorngrowth Sentries, or do you play the peasant and make the trade like we saw there? Do you try and play out Druid of the Reef and then drop down Claw Fury Adept and get like the cleanest, I guess the cheapest possible clear on your opponent's minion? But I don't mind what happened here, especially knowing you're against the Imp deck, right? Normally you say, oh, my bunch of 1/1s have Divine Shield and now I've wasted my Claw Fury Adept, or I've used it up to not get as much face damage as I could have, feel kind of bad about this. But now your opponent's deployed all these 1/1 imps. It's paid off tremendously, because if you want, you can just trade the Divine Shields for all of these 1/1s and you'll never see a more efficient imp clear. And I mean, like, maybe where it's safe, but yeah, I have to imagine you kill all these imps wherever you can, right? Like, it's even for another deck that's as aggressive as this Druid is, you understand you cannot allow them to just get their turn back and cast, you know, Impending Catastrophe, even any number of other sort of imp-dependent cards. So those are wiped out for the cost of very little. There is some slight concern with some of these aggro decks that you fill up your board with minions that aren't the best, but the Druid cares the least probably out of all of them, because you do have those buff spells from hand. You know, apart from the Claw Fury Adept, most of the plays you want to do to kind of go over the top once you've created a board of minions do not require a minion space to be free. So you never need to worry about the situation where your opponent denies you the chance to trade and like traps your high cost finisher in hand.
Absolutely, yeah. You can see now Blitz as well, just continuing to make this a nice wide board on the back end as well. It doesn't have really that many clear, big wave kits inside of Farbs he has to worry about, but he is starting to buff up. The damage is starting to build through. He's clearing away the imps once again. Doesn't want an impending catastrophe to obviously ruin his chances here. And now this is some big damage coming down onto this Warlock, and this is the power of the Beast aggro Druid that we've been wanting to see, or has been completely dominating the open ladder.
Yeah, this is more or less checkmate, right? Because like this is the matchup where the boost to health from the Prize Fury, that really matters, right? Normally you're like, I'm playing this almost certainly just to get +1 power. It's doubling the effectiveness of my board in a lot of cases. But here, where board control is so important, this is basically checkmate, because there's like, you're now eating up the imps so efficiently that there's no way for the Warlock deck to get its engine started. And unfortunately, as much as I like this Curse variant from Farbs, this is not the matchup that it's built for, right? Like, the reaction to go from default Imp Warlock to Curse Imp Warlock was because of all of the control decks, which were beating this by just board wiping you and dealing with your early boards. So you go away from all-in early game board presence and you go for these late game curses, and suddenly we're never going to have a late game because you're stuck in a drag race against Token Aggro Druid. They have never strayed from the true path of hitting face.
And they love it, right? They're more than happy to play out these drag races every single time. If I've ever seen someone that's willing to go from 0 to 100 meters and then just let the engine explode, this aggro druid is the one that's happy to do that. So as we can see here, that does mean that this time around it's able to win its quick race. Unfortunately, the Warlock wasn't able to do it that time around, but this makes it one apiece for both Farbs and Blitz. So now that Warlock still needs to win here for Farbs. Blitz, though, on the other hand, has his own Warlock. So it's actually going to be a mirror, not really a mirror matchup, it's going to be a mirror, of course, of the classes here, but Blitz, I believe, really likes, and actually being true to the name, Blitz, likes those quicker games. This is actually the Imkin world that we know in.
I mean, like as you identified, not to take, I think Blitz definitely has brought some aggressive deck lists, but this is also kind of just the direction things are going, right? It's that cycle of the metagame. It doesn't always happen so neatly, but there is a natural tendency, especially if you're in a small field event like this, and you know that having a good matchup on a couple of players can make the difference between qualification and not. In the early weeks, we saw a lot of aggro, right? Then you see the control decks adapt. They play the right board wipes. They have the right tech. They shut down the aggro decks, even the really strong ones like the Imp King, and they're doing great. Then you see combo decks come out, and they're like, well, we'll go under the control decks, because in Hearthstone especially, combo decks are much harder to interact with, right? Like, most of them just don't care about whatever your mage or your priest is doing to try and slow the game down until turn 9 or 10. Those rogue decks are just going to go off and kill you. And now we're seeing the only natural reaction to a sea of Miracle Rogues and Face Hunters, which is, I will play the most aggro deck possible, and I will just beat your face in with minions while you're trying to set up some sort of fancy miracle play. And this is going to be really interesting, because we do see now the two versions of the Imp King deck clash. We've got a much more traditional, aggressive build from Blitz, and I actually don't know. I'm not going to be proud enough to tell you I know whether or not the curse adaptation from Farbs helps or hinders in this case.
Well, I guess we're able to find out between Blitz and Farbs right now at this moment in time. The other thing that's really interesting as well is Farbs actually mulliganed away the Imp King as well, so isn't going to have that option to actually infuse it and then be able to play a really powerful turn 6. It's probably hoping on or banking on the fact that perhaps can do a Fiendish Circle, get a number of imps that way, and perhaps in one turn empower it once it does get into hand. But of course, isn't going to have that guaranteed infuse off the back of it. Blitz, on the other hand, here, happy to just continue playing out those imps once before as well. Farbs actually getting a nice little curve off the back end of that Flustered Librarian, able to obviously get that little boost there, and of course clear the board while also Blitz losing that 3 life. So things looking pretty up here for Farbs at the moment, but of course it's still early days. We're still in turn 3 at this moment in time. The Vile Library will be coming down here for Farbs as well. As we see, just a Void Walker for a little bit of extra meat into that board.
Yeah, look, it has to sting to mulligan away Imp King Refarm. We've seen, and like, it's looking great now, but we have seen this mirror basically hinge, flip in an instant based on one player getting down an infused Refarm on curve and the other player being even a turn slower. But I think that may even just be already the influence of the different build from Farbs, right? The deck list that Blitz is running, you can keep Imp King Refarm basically as a no-brainer, because the rest of your deck is so low curve and so sort of board slanted. You're never going to mess up your game plan by holding on to a kind of greedy, expensive legend in your hand. But with the much higher incidence of 4, 5, 6 cost cards in Farbs' deck, if you try and hold on to the Imp King Refarm to set it up on curve, you're just as likely to not draw your early game imps, and then like you'll have way worse problems than not in playing an infused Imp King on curve. You'll be dead on like turn 4. So, you know, given look at the 6 and 5 cost of drawn already, probably justified to try and mulligan into cheaper cards just to make sure you have some kind of curve.
Yeah, the curve here, though, wasn't really working out for Farbs. There you can see that Drag Blow was used in the 1/1 Imp. Not the most efficient, but you do need to start to get those curses up and rolling. Blitz, on the other hand, has plenty of cards to play with, has a lot of options in terms of what needs to be done. But of course, as you mentioned, one of the interesting things with the sequences with these more aggro-oriented decks is the fact that you do need to really think through those lines early, whereas of course as it gets later in the game, it gets easier and easier directly afterwards. It's going to be a Wicked Shipment coming in as well, another Flame Imp off the back of that from Blitz, who is just continuing to fill that board. None of them have the Imp King just yet, so not really infusing anything meaningful, but of course just trying to maintain control of the board. Blitz is brought down to 19 HP, so things start to get a little bit sketchy here for Blitz when it comes to perhaps dying in one turn out of the blue.
This is such an interesting turn for Farbs, right? Like, Farbs' last turn, really, really risky decision, and one that you have to think about to leave that one imp alive. And you can see immediate, like, punish after a sense, right? Because by leaving an imp alive, you have a target that can receive the buff from the Vial Library and immediately use it. But because you had the Voidwalker, it was only used to trade in the Voidwalker. And I can understand, as you said, neither player has the Imp King, but Farbs doesn't know that. You have to be thinking about the Imp King you mulled away and looking at Blitz's hand and how many cards are in it. And it's hard to not feel like your opponent will have the Imp King and you don't. And in that situation, I too would definitely want to be like taking a slight risk to try and be the aggressor in the matchup, right? Because now that you're up by this decisive life total, you can make a greedier play like dropping Zakul, you know, as you're basically a turn off. And your opponent, most importantly, is likely to be pressured in a lot of situations to be trading with you on their turn instead of them hitting face and you being stuck the one forcing trades to prevent next turn's lethal, right? Like, that difference in who has sort of the front foot, who has the initiative is pretty much the matchup. It's not even like an edge in the matchup. Like, that's who wins. Whoever is forcing the opponent to play defensively and trade while being behind on life total is almost always going to win the game unless like a card with impact level of Imp King comes through and cleans things up. Zakul, I don't know if that was quite the level of the Imp King, but you can't deny that the life swing from life draining with curses is a powerful factor in an aggro mirror, as is Tamsin's board clear.
Yeah, as you can see, that following that through directly afterwards. Best ball, a nice little curve off the back end as well, will clear away most of those minions on board there. The Shady Bartender remains, but of course, what the Bartender brings is literally that battle cry. That 4-1 is still going to have some value coming into the mix, but Blitz now down to 14 HP, does need to really think through things, or does really need to think through everything going forward. Another Fiendish Circle seems to be the player there, has that Grimoire of Sacrifice, another Blood-bound Imp, and a Vial Library to play with as well. So it's going to be interesting to see what he's going to decide to do. We'll just buff up that Shady Bartender.
Wow, just going for it.
Looking big. Yeah, he wants some big damage here now as well. He's using it all up, and 12-9 is going to be a nice little pump there towards Farbs' face.
Yeah, I mean, Haps has just identified that Farbs does not have Smothering Starfish in the list, right? Blitz has one. Blitz has one in hand right now, and I was about to congratulate Farbs on being in a spot where those sorts of cards don't really matter. Like, if both players are playing interactive cards and trading with each other's effects, Farbs is the one coming out ahead because these curses are much more reliable and harder to disrupt clock. But then Blitz just kind of like shakes that off, realizes, hey, I'm the aggro player here, and just goes for it with the double buff on the one minion left alive. It's like, okay, well, you left a minion alive, so I guess it's the straightforward play. You just slam it, and yeah, okay, you can mop up the rest of the imps on board, but suddenly this is a lot dicier because you just don't have good tools for dealing with a 12-7.
What we can see here, Flustered Librarian is going to be the top deck here. It is, again, a very big Shady Bartender on the back end. They can continue to play it. I'm trying to see how he's going to buff up this big boy on the next play. I'm trying to see if he's got any way to actually get some more imps onto the board. He does have that one there, the Blood-bound imp. So you can see Blitz thinking through what's going to be the play coming into it. 11 HP, though, is definitely something to give you a bit of a cause for concern, a bit of pause, really, on that back end. Farbs is at 17 life, so probably can survive a couple of turns, and does have that Imp King refarm in hand now, but of course this is a uninfused Imp King as well, they have to take into account. So, I mean, you could still just throw it down at this point. I imagine you just want to put some super pressure onto the board and play that next anyway without using the infuse, because you've dealt enough damage with those curses prior.
Yeah, I think that the Imp King may end up needing to be the play, and I'm sure it's the play that Blitz is sort of thinking about. Blitz, I'm certain, is thinking about how to go face, because, again, if your opponent drops the Imp King, the only way to beat that is to be, like, in range to beat them, to, like, just lethal them next turn, right? You can't really outvalue that card, so, let alone the Curse Engine. So, yeah, this is what's looking good. Interesting choice to use Grimoire of Sacrifice on the Librarian. Not that that's an especially valuable minion in this guy. Okay, we're just going to use it on both. That makes sense. Because I was about to say, if you're going to blow up any of your own minions in this case, I'd probably be blowing up one that does 2 damage to you when you're, like, dicing with death as if. But Blitz seems to have found a line here just in the back-to-back Vial Library, and Farbs, I don't remember if the Shady Bartender was even a thing that he could potentially have cleared, but certainly maybe even regretting letting this whole board thing spiral out of control to start with by going for the 4 face damage with the Flame Imp and allowing the first Vial Library buff to come down. I mean, Vial Library is a very swingy card, but it just goes to show almost always the best thing you can do against this Warlock deck is just clear the imps, because it's, especially in the early and mid game, very hard for them to generate a board full of imps and get their imp synergy cards off one after another in the same turn. And even if they do, they will not be like immediately turning that into face damage.
I think what's really cool about this is, like you said, Blitz sort of just shaked it off, right? Understood, hey, you know what, I can just be aggro here. And it's clearly one of the most simple and eloquent things that you can do to actually just sort of turn things around when you are on the back foot. Sometimes what you need to do is go, you know what, I'm just going to throw everything that I've got at you and see if I can kill you. And sometimes you do just kill them, as it was just illustrated right here. It felt like Farbs had everything in play here, and only reason that Blitz was able to take that one away was because he threw caution to the wind, understood, yeah, I am that aggro deck like you said before, and then just went to the face. And that is what it is sometimes. Sometimes, you know, the line of playing things a little bit, okay, cool, do I want to have a little bit of gas in the back hand here? Do I want to make sure that I'm going to be at this point here? Will I die by this point in time? Meh. Screw it, I'm just going for it now. And sometimes that just gets you the win. So as we can see here, it is going to be Blitz actually walking away with that particular round robin win. But of course, we still have a bit more Hearthstone action to come your way. But before we do go to a quick break, anything you want to add to that one?
You know, I guess I'll say best of luck to the Curse Warlock deck. I think we'll be seeing Farbs again in a little while, and I just want to say I think the deck is good. I really like the adaptation, and that was remarkably close even on that final turn, right? We're 1 damage away from clearing that bartender, and that's the whole game. Like, if your opponent doesn't have double vial library, I think you get the win there as Farbs. If you have maybe a very slightly different hand there at the end, you maybe get the win. These are the margins that we're dealing with, even in these, you know, very explosive, kind of not necessarily interactive aggro builds. The matches can be quite dicey. So, you know, enjoying these sorts of high skill drag races, hopefully see a few more over the course of the day.
Absolutely. With that being said though, guys, we do have a quick break coming up. So grab yourself some refreshments. We'll be right back. Hearthstone Open presented by Blizzard and AEL. If you're just joining us, Blitz was able to actually take out Farbs beforehand, so pretty impressive stuff from by there by Blitz. We get the privilege of watching Blitz once again go up against Jake the Dog now. Things will be very interesting here, because if Blitz is actually able to beat out Jake in this next play, that means that Blitz has already qualified as our number 1 rank, and we're able to walk away with that $50, which is pretty nice there. And of course, qualify for our grand finals coming up in the coming weeks. But Jake the Dog here is obviously going to be looking to stop that from happening, wants to qualify themselves. And one of the interesting facts about Jake the Dog here, he's also sort of qualified for our high school competition as well, but does have the option to actually make some use some options with that a little bit later. So it all depends on his performance coming through into this. That being said there, Barb, how are you feeling about this matchup?
I'm feeling like Jake the Dog arguably has a better set of deck lists for dealing with Blitz, even if it will be potentially kind of some aggro mirrors going on. They've both got pretty similar Druid and Warlock lists, very aggressively slanted Imp Warlock deck with only a few cards difference. And then the main difference between Jake's deck and Blitz's deck in terms of Druids is that Blitz is running a very bourgeois variant of the Beast Druid deck, playing 2 copies of Composting, which is an epic spell, Mendrix. I don't know if you know, those cost a little bit of dust. So, you know, if you're really a true budget warrior, you're doing it for the proletariat, you be Jake the Dog and you play the minimal cost, mostly commons, no epics, no legendary Beast Druid. Like, the funny thing is, this is not like a bit, like, that's a real deck. It's not just most of the time, right, when you see a version of a deck like this that's so cheap, you think, okay, understandable, getting 3 decks together for a competition format is hard for some people. You have to make some compromises. Maybe not every legendary is like the absolute be-all end-all, right? Not everything is like the quest, which it makes the deck work. In this case, this is arguably the best version of the Druid list. All of those expensive cards, just slow it down. You just want to slam and jam. But I think what's most interesting to me is how the bans are going to go, right? Because each of them does have a deck that's a little bit out of rhythm of the rest of their lineup, right? We saw Blitz playing that rogue deck, which, like, can engage pretty fast, but certainly works a little differently to a minion-based aggro deck. And Jake, no different, has the Face Hunter. So, you know, either of those decks could really be the spanner in the works for their opponent. Maybe that means they'll both get banned, but we'll have to wait and see.
Well, I'm looking at that. I'm pretty sure it is Quest Hunter. So Face Hunter and Quest Hunter both do the same thing.
At this point I just called it Face Hunter, but it is the Quest.
It doesn't say. It's honestly, it's just a longer version of Face Hunter.
The Quest just helps you be Face Hunter better.
Yeah, exactly. It just helps you be a better Face Hunter. But the thing that's interesting about that, right, is that typically Face Hunter's like, I'm going to go really quick, whereas this quest is, I'm going to slow it down just that little bit, but I'm still going straight for your face as soon as that quest is finished up. So it is essentially Quest Face Hunter, in my opinion, anyway. Of course, these guys are just warming up, getting themselves ready to roll, and while we do that, we just want to highlight our sponsors. So, of course, all of our highlights today are brought to you by McDonald's Australia Shootout, and I'm loving it in chat to capture your favorite moments. And, of course, you can catch those all at the end of the day on AEL's Twitter. And, of course, Mate in Internet Mobile. Throw into the chat hashtag Let's Be Mates and be in the running to win 2 cards valued at $3.95. And make sure you upgrade your internet and mobile with Mate in Internet Mobile. So, guys, make sure you throw those into chat there. We want to give away those card packs. We'll have a lot of fun with that as well. Now, Bart, I think everyone's still getting ready here. I think the bands, have they come through just yet, or they're still... I'm frantically refreshing over here just to see. Obviously, we're waiting any word from the admins, or just when it gets up there on the Battlefield. Looks like the bands are out. Both players have banned the Druids. All right, so I'm happy with that. Does mean we'll get to see some deck variety. Also means, like, you know, we just saw the Druid. We'll probably see more of the Druid later on. Does also show the respect the Druid is merited, right, at this point in the metagame. Like you said, arguably the deck to beat right now. It's kind of cycling through. When I say Open Ladder King right now, we're talking a 59% win rate on Open Ladder.
That's staggering, right? And like that means you're the very best deck against the open field. And sometimes that doesn't translate to tournament, because as we just pointed out, like, the strength of this Druid deck is that if you have a God hand, it kind of beats everything. Like, just nobody can react fast enough to stop the overwhelming token surge of Druid on the play with the nuts. But you can also lose to everything, and you're also going to encounter decks in tournament that are maybe set up to beat this deck more so than any deck would be focused on you narrowly on the ladder, right? The ladder has to get pretty degenerate for you to be bringing like a specific counter druid deck, even when it's this good, because there are just other classes out there. But today, both players' form of druid counter is simply the ban button, and we'll be seeing that Quest Hunter and Miracle Rogue after all.
That is definitely an effective way to counter the druid.
100%
I'm just not going to play it.
I've never lost to a druid deck after banning it, I'll tell you that.
Definitely an effective way to go about it. Of course, these guys haven't jumped into the action just yet. Of course, still thinking through the mulligans. I think you do get rid of that Sea Giant if you are Jake the Dog. But then again, who knows what you want to do if you do get an opportunity to get a very large board up and rolling. Things could go south. Blitz, of course, I think is actually using the Rogue this time around. Doesn't have, of course, a Demon Hunter in his rotation. I wasn't tricked this time. Haha, take that, Blizzard.
Yeah. I mean, that's an easy one. Nobody has a Demon Hunter in their rotation. That class really in the doldrums right now. Some of their mechanics are interesting, but we've fallen far from the death rattle / combo days of last season, where Demon Hunter was one of the most common and successful classes. Now,
oh man, there's Il'gynoth combo.
We lost Il'gynoth. It was all downhill from there, man.
It was wild. Oh, just you see them like, do they have enough to like get the self-healing to kill themselves with self-healing themselves?
There's just a bunch of like blind, like demonically mutated dudes in a bar, ordering shots of fell whiskey and being like, I feel like hell, man. I just want it back, and they've got like a framed photo of like the weird pink worm monster just hanging out. Jokes aside, though, Jake the Dog did not mulligan that Sea Giant. Mendrix, I can tell that you don't play a lot of aggro decks, because this is the Sea Giant matchup, right? Like, we've talked about this as a tech card. I think one of our champions in previous weeks had this I can't remember who, so sorry to that person, obviously not the only one, but Sea Giant isn't in everyone's Imp Warlock list, but when it is, it's for setups like this, right? This is the opposite adjustment to the one that we just saw with the curses that are designed to go like around enemy board clear. This is like, well, I assume you're going to be playing minions, and if you are, I am going to get basically a free 8/8 whenever I like. And you can see the Sea Giant's already discounted most of the way just from your own imps. A little bit unfortunate the board is going to be reduced in size here, but it's still going to be a very early Sea Giant if Jake gets their way.
Yeah, you can see here, it's been discounted. Of course, they've managed to kill out that Flustered Librarian, who's also dealt some decent damage to Blitz right off the back here. I mean, yeah, it was a bit slow for us getting into the battle, but these guys are definitely speeding things up here. It looks like the Sinstone Graveguard is also going to come down as well to summon up a nice, juicy, strong ghost off the back of it. Also using that Wild Ball Null, and like you said, I mean, even though, yes, it's nice to have that Sea Giant in hand, he was like, yeah, he's got rid of these... Killed most of the stuff here. At the end of the day, as these minions continue to get summoned, this Sea Giant coming down is going to be some big tech power coming through to take the dog. But I do like how Blitz is continuing to whittle away at that board and make it a little bit more expensive to throw the Sea Giant down. Yeah,
the Sea Giant arguably a little better. Sorry, I got slightly flipped around here as I was loading into the game, but the Rogue matchup, not quite. It's still a great Sea Giant game because, of course, the Rogue deck is going to put minions on the battlefield, and since it's hard to directly fight those minions, as you can see, having an 8/8 earlier on is going to help you get that pace that you need to keep up with the sort of multiplicative power of the Miracle Rogue deck. I'm more looking forward to seeing how this does against the other Warlock or against the Druid, right? The sort of multi-aggro deck lineup. But even so, the fact that your opponent draws Wild Ball Null really nullifies any claim you have to kind of the better draw, right? Because this is the anti-aggro tech for the Miracle Rogue, right? You get basically a free 3/5 rush. We saw from the Hand Warlocks of yesteryear how insane that discounted rush Null is at just flipping the script in any and all aggro matchups. It's very hard to beat that value when you're playing these kind of small, fair minions, even more so when, as the Warlock, you're basically relying on establishing board control early on. And I think it's that mix of the Warlock deck requires you to be like winning on board so that your imps live and you can kind of come back around a turn cycle and have an impending catastrophe set to go. But at the same time, unlike the Druid deck, you don't have those super cheap buffing effects. You know, basically your best buff that you have access to that buffs your team is Imp King Refarm, and that's, turn 6 and 4 infuses. So, it's kind of a very awkward line to walk, and we do see it fall apart more often than you'd usually expect from a top tier aggro deck.
Absolutely. We do see that impending catastrophe come down for Jake the Dog here, and that's a really nice hand off the backhand, right? You get the Imp King, you get the Shady Bartender, you've got the Fiendish Circle as well to actually infuse the Imp King directly afterwards. This is looking like it would work as a very decent curve in the next couple of turns here. Of course, Blitz on the other side here needs to start turning that aggro towards Jake the Dog here, down to 16 life. Jake looking very healthy on 29 HP. And does have, of course, the Wild Ball Null, the Vile Call, Shroud of Concealment, and the Maestro of the Masquerade, which is only really a 3-2 body. Of course, the big factor is what it can do. And I think things are a little bit hard here for Blitz because he really does need to get something back. I think he needs to get a Van Cleef, or he needs to get his Edwin at least now. And you can see he's trying to like ramp up at this moment in time by actually just putting a big board right onto this moment in time, saying, I don't have the cards I need to pull off a miracle right now, so I'm just going to have a very wide board.
I mean, I like the decision, right? You've got there are two paths in that moment, right? Red pill, blue pill kind of point in the game. Do you cast that Shroud and hope that you pull something that fixes this game for you? Edwin, Necrolord, whatever. Or do you just play out your whole entire hand, get the largest second ghost you can out of your location, and say, this is it, I'm all in, chips across the table? And we've chosen the latter, and I don't mind it. I mean, I just went on a huge rant about how important board control is to the Warlock deck, and how if your opponent gets this setup where they have all these minions that are all larger than yours, it becomes really hard to establish yourself as the Warlock. Imp King Refarm, possibly the only exception, but it's still a little ways off being infused. This is kind of like a setup turn that Jake is now forced into, where you kind of just need to play out some stuff so that your Imp King will be infused next turn around. But, who knows what Blitz will be able to pull next turn, because it looks like you're out of gas. But if you've created a bit of breathing room here by playing out your previous stuff in hand, maybe that Shroud does draw you an Edwin. Maybe you do get some momentum going here, and at the very least, you've pushed some damage to face, and you're getting some lifelink value to kind of dig you out of the hole you were just in a second.
You can see as well, this Ravenous Valfiends would be nice for the lifesteal. A couple of options here now available. You can see Jake the Dog has refilled the board with some relatively mid, like I'd say, like weak minions in the slide here, but at least
they're one-cost Voidwalkers.
Ooh, he got the Edwin off the back. And
he got the Smothering Starfish
as well. He's got a lot of options in terms of he wants to play here. I wouldn't be playing the Edwin now, but probably that Starfish coming through would be nice.
Yeah, it kind of sucks that there's basically no way. Like, I've seen people go for Desperation Edwins like this, but it's usually when you have the coin on turn 3 going second that you play the Edwin into no mana. So, yeah, we're going to have to hold it, because you would really much rather play the Edwin right now, right? Because you may, honestly, I wouldn't. Maybe you just slam it as a 3-3 for 3, right? Because you're trying for next turn lethal. As it is, we don't see that, right? But you wanted to put as much damage on the board as possible, because, like, Imp King Refarm is never, like, immediate lethal, right? It's just going to make a big board of imps. And even if your opponent plays, like, a Voidwalker or some sort of taunt, all you have to do is throw that Starfish down out of hand. So I would have maximized damage on board, but I don't mind this play from Jake, and it ends up, from Blitz, and it ends up not mattering.
Yeah, he's just got on the side here. Jake the Dog, basically showing, look, this is the ammo that I had. Unfortunately, I haven't put it into my gun yet. And so I won't be able to fire, and Blitz is like, well, while my ammo may not be as impressive as yours, mine's in the gun. And so Blitz was able to take the shot first, and that literally what mattered in this particular match. Now, of course, even though we do have Jake the Dog down, not out just yet, has the ability to still claw back this match and needs to win on the next one. But now I'm just checking to see what did Blitz have beforehand. I believe they banned out the Druids. That means now he's only got his Warlock left.
Yeah. So this will be Blitz's Imp Warlock, like we just saw before, and I'm not sure, will we see a pivot to the Hunter or not? I wouldn't mind it, but again, some players are a bit more fatalistic. We have pivoted to the Giant Stalker Rexar, the Hunter. I do like this from Jake the Dog, even if it's purely psychological, even if it's like, well, I have to win with both decks anyway, and you're going to be only fighting against the Warlock from now on. Just, take a breather from what you just played against, and see if you can be on the more late game side of things now, if that's more comfortable to you. Certainly, I feel comfortable if I'm playing Defend the Dwarven District. This is probably the strongest quest in the game right now. I think we've seen it, like, not just in terms of success we've seen here, but you just look at it, and it's so flexible and so consistent, as well as providing you options in your sequencing. It doesn't feel as punishing as, say, the Priest quest does, when you sort of you know, where you actually can fail your draw, whereas it's all but impossible for this list to not flip the quest in a hurry. And then once it does, being able to target minions with your hero power, even that first stage, does so much to take the pressure off.
Yeah, you can see Blitz, of course, is beginning to sum up those imps, and what's really nice about having that pressure off is the fact that you also have that 40 life as well. Jake the Dog down to 37 now. Of course, has to just flip that quest first. He's actually thinking about dropping down this Dumbar Dart on curve. I kind of thought that maybe the Arcane Shot, just to get rid of the Flame Imp and stop that from generating value, would be the thought process here, but Jake the Dog just really wants to progress this quest as fast as possible, and
I
just wants to get some extra value on the back end.
Well, the conundrum, right, against this Imp King deck, or any deck that puts on this much pressure, is if you are a deck that has some sort of engine going on, or even if you just have cards in it that work like this, like the Dumbbell Dar Bunker, where it sort of doesn't provide its value immediately, you often have no, like, window to play them at all. You cannot take a turn off to play this sort of stuff when it's costing you, you know, 8 to 10 damage, when it's the difference between actually clearing your opponent's board and like letting them, you know, buff it up to the point that suddenly you've effectively lost the game. So getting it on turn 2 is about as low risk as you can get, and it is going to have an actual impact on the board. Also, I like the psychological difference between if you played a secret from hand, I feel like it would change how Blitz played. You might not even see Blitz commit the Fiendish Circle, whereas Jake knows with how this deck works, you want your opponent to play out a wall of imps into your, you know, powerful explosive trap clear, not play that second Bloodbound imp, and like hold on to the imps for later on, not play a Flustered Librarian, right? Not play any larger minions, because there's, like, your opponent is not going to be able to buff the team yet. It's 5 mana for the Bartender, and so you know that this explosive trap is just going to successfully deal with a lot of impish resources. Didn't even get the Impending Catastrophe off, or the Vile Library off beforehand. So if you're Jake the Dog, you are just, like, absolutely hooting and hollering at that. It's not game over yet, but that's a huge hurdle overcome.
Yeah, you're pretty happy as well. And unfortunately for Blitz, not really the best in hand. As you can see, he does throw down that Flustered Librarian as well, but that's a lot of gas already spent.
Yeah.
In terms of what's coming across there, you haven't managed to get, like, the Shady Bartender, you haven't managed to get the Imp King, you haven't gotten any Impending Catastrophes, and you've already used up a lot of, like you said, a lot of the Imp power has sort of just gone down the drain with that explosive trap. So Jake the Dog here is probably quite happy to be down to 30 HP, but at least gotten rid of most of the threats available for Blitz this time, and unless there's a really big draw on the back end, I feel like Blitz does need to use a life tap to get a Fiendish Circle into an Impending Catastrophe to really refill that hand and then have a big threat come back. I think things are going to be going stuff. There's the Impending Catastrophe now. That is actually nice because it already has the Fiendish Circle, so Blitz has the way to refill, so maybe it still has a chance to get back into this.
There's now some chance, but I see a big issue, which is, like, the combination of, well, this Ice Trap hurts, but also, like, just the combination, I like the prescience of Blitz to go for the Impending Doom first and not try and cast the Fiendish Circle. But either way, like, that hurts so much, right? Being able to slam one of those libraries right away would have been massive. Being able to follow up with anything would have been massive, but now, like, against some decks, you'd be fine. Against this deck, having to lose a turn is brutal, and doubly so when, like, you can't attack with these 2 imps. You cannot trade 4 of your life for 4 of your opponent's life.
No,
Blitz, you just have to chill right now. They are sitting there to count as imps on board.
He's thinking about it. He wants to go for it.
I don't think it helped. I mean, okay, well, look, how far are we off flipping the quest here? Okay, fair enough. Like, you could make the decision, like, I'm going to go for it in the next 2 turns, because you have that double Vile Library. Maybe that's good enough. Next turn, right, you can go Mischievous Imp into Vile Library into buff. That's not what we're doing. We're going to hold off.
Yeah, is just going to let it go this time around. Realizes that my life is just too important at this point. We can look for a really big turn off the Vile Library. Yeah, that's the problem here, isn't it? He's actually looking for that Piercing Shot as well. So
wow,
I mean, I don't really like this choice.
We're going for the board clear. We're going for the board clear. I mean, as we've discussed before, we got excited because it looked like suddenly the Warlock deck had stumbled to the point where, like, Jake was just going to be able to gun Blitz down in the next 2 turns. But Jake doesn't know what Blitz drew, right? For all Jake knows, like, I'm about to infuse my opponent's Imp King with farm they just drew, and then they're about to, like, I've just cleared them a path to play a board that's going to two-turn me, and I haven't flipped my quest yet. So better to focus on the clear, deny them any, like, if you clear away all the imps, they're just not going to be able to do a game-winning play against you. It just keeps being true. And this is pretty good, right? The imp circle into Vile Library is about as good a recovery as we can get. We saw last game how good indeed. But yeah, I think Jake is still comfiest just trying to get this Tavish Master Marksman off the quest, and from there you can burn your opponent down real fast. But this does present a problem now, especially if your opponent has further buffs in hand, and Mendrix, we know that Blitz does.
Yeah, he definitely has a little bit of extra power in the back end there. Can make something happen. Another Mischievous Imp, another Vile Library. So you kind of need to clear this imp board now to actually make things more effective here. But of course, that if you can actually drop down a Vile Library and just really pump off this Voidwalker, there's some real big damage coming out of it.
Yeah, and Jake respects that. Even if it's inefficient, just finds every which way you can to clear away imps, not even attempting to whittle away the health of the large taunt Voidwalker. You're just going to have to try and deal with that sort of in the future somehow. Mark that down as a future me problem in a turn from now. But yeah, you just can't allow the Vile Library value to start accruing too much. Or, an Imp King to come down and buff all the imps up by +2/+2.
So this is the thing I was looking at. I was thinking, like, okay, cool. Do you want to... He gets rid of one of the traps, so he knows he doesn't have to worry about that. So he can Mischievous Imp into another Wild Library. This is actually going to be very big. He can actually get 2 hits off this now. This is going to be a huge Voidwalker, and he knows that there's actually going to be no secrets in tow.
I was almost shocked to see Jake go for that Frost Trap. I mean, like, you don't really have a better option for the mana, but... like that, the Hunter traps out of all the traps in Hearthstone are going to be the ones that people play around, right? Like everyone knows explosive traps, everyone knows freezing trap, and if you have a decent way to play around them without ruining your own turn, you basically always will. And unfortunately, when you can't clear, like the Voidwalker has been such the perfect card to have, right? If that was any other minion in your deck and you tried, buffing it up like this, you would not get such value because those imps would have all gotten clear the turn before. Things look completely different in terms of tempo right now. But instead, Jake the Dog is just struggling, even a deck with so much firepower, to bring it down. And Tavish is here to the rescue, but can you really afford to commit fire? I guess you can.
Yep,
Fire cost. Yeah. Do we? I'm assuming we have the clear. We're out of spell. This looks bad. Yeah, if you're hesitating this long to target the hero power, I think you've realized that you have maybe
you've
cost yourself.
You've used too much. You've used too much to try and get something here. I mean, does he? Yeah, he's still there. That 9/2 still going to be there.
It's still just there. So I mean.
Oh my
Tavish costs 5 mana, so maybe you didn't have the mana otherwise, but...
You can drop I was going to say, you can drop the Imp there and then just use 2 Vile Libraries. And this is just going to be, that's it.
Oh, I mean, this is like lethal and then some, really.
Yeah.
I think you just had to respect the Voidwalker and throw everything at it. I feel like there was probably enough mana. Maybe there wasn't, right? Maybe there was no clear there at all. I'd have to go back to the start of the turn, but I was surprised. Anytime you're playing that Tavish, it's like, well, damn, this isn't the window for that. That might be GG's. And yeah, poor old Jake the Dog just can't find it there. I really thought the Hunter would get it done, Mendrix.
Yeah, I know, exactly. And it just seems to be Blitz once again understanding, you know what, I just need to put all my cards on the board there. I need to put my damage in when I've got my opportunities for it, understanding that line very well. And you can tell, was even thinking through, okay, how much power do I really want to pump into this Voidwalker right off the bat? I feel there was a little bit of patience that came from Blitz as well, even though, his name is Blitz and he wants to go fast. In this scenario, he did just take his time, make sure that he had enough ammo once again to get to that point. And it looks like Blitz is going to be our #1 seed coming through from the Western Conference. So big congratulations there to Blitz in that sense of things there. That being said, though, we still need to play out to find out who's going to be our 2nd seed. So still some more Hearthstone games to go across that. But congratulations there to Blitz who are qualifying and walking away with that $50 right off the bat.
Yeah, I mean, you've earned your #1 seed, right, for representing WA. Maybe you had to walk a shorter road to get there than some of the others, but doesn't mean you're any less fierce, right? We haven't seen Blitz lose. And look, if you can on command draw double Vile Library basically every game, if you can just kind of like, damn, this looks like a desperate situation for our hero, and just rip Impending Doom into Vile Library. It was a big pickup. It was a big pickup off the back end. You can see, But you have to. jokes aside, I don't want to for a second really denigrate these players. I just can't say that without immediately countermanding myself. It's about playing to your outs, right? And we've seen it consistently from Blitz, understanding when you have to go for the gun, like as this Warlock deck, and how to do that. And it's really impressive to see.
Well, that being said there, guys, we still have some more Hearthstone action coming up, so please do not go anywhere. We will have a quick break. and we have returned with the ANZ Hearthstone Open presented by Blizzard and AEL. Well, guys, if you are just joining us, we do have one of our Rank 1 qualifiers already into that mix. It's going to be Blitz beforehand, but of course, we still need to work out who's going to be our second qualifier for the Western Conference. It's going to be up against Farbs versus Jake the Dog now. Bud, who do you reckon's got a bit of an edge here?
Well, I want to say Farbs because I like that Curse Warlock deck, but unfortunately Jake the Dog's lineup seems so similar to Blitz's, and they just had a pretty hard-fought battle, and I mean, we saw what happened when Blitz ran into Farbs before. The matchups did not seem so good for Farbs in the end, so I hope we won't just kind of see a quick replay of that, but I wonder if it's on the cards, unfortunately.
Awesome. Well, we seem to be getting ready as well, just a few dummy matches to make sure that they're ready to play. We do want to have a quick shout out to our sponsors. Of course, as always, McDonald's Australia will be providing all of the highlights of today. So make sure you capture your favorite moments by letting us know in chat. I'm loving it. You can catch out all of those highlights at the end of the day on AEL's Twitter. And we are also going to announce our winner for the Mate in Internet Mobile giveaway. So guys, Scorpio13, congratulations for putting in hashtag Let's Be Mates in chat. You'll be the winner of those 2 card packs valued at $3.95. So congratulations once again on that one. All right, so I think we are getting these players ready as we mentioned before there, Bard. Now, I think Farbs versus Jake the Dog. Jake the Dog, I feel, might be struggling a little bit coming into this, but of course does have a pretty good deck composition put together, and definitely does understand the win conditions of those decks. So definitely not going to be one of those scenarios where I think Farbs is just going to, wipe the floor with Jake the Dog here.
Yeah, I want to emphasize how rough some of those draws were. Like getting sniped by the impending doom into back-to-back via library on the taunt, like in that last game.
Oh yeah, it was nuts.
I'm not gonna say that it wasn't like quality play by his moments. Like you can't sometimes you just can't account for that stuff. It just happens to you. It feels bad, but you just shrug it off and move on. I hope that Jake is capable of it. I don't want to put too much stock in the fact that presumably Jake is in high school, right? Like in the high school qualifier. Potentially for the same event. So, maybe there's a maturity factor, but I'd like to think well of our youth, and I believe that Jake will show
the future, right? We have to take that into account,
exactly.
Right?
Show some youthful resilience.
I know for a fact, look, my time in the sun has gone.
I was about to say, it sucks to not be the youth, doesn't it?
I know, right? But Jake the Dog, he's got his whole life ahead of him. This guy, who knows what he can achieve going
We're
forward.
our hair is turning white as we speak, Mendrix.
It's already happened to me. I've already got
away.
You can't see it, right? Because the camera's hiding most of the ugly. But I do have a little bit of white just on the side.
I've been thus far spared, but no one can be spared it forever, so...
True, right? It's like time will tell in that scenario. We're still waiting for these players to get ready as well. I'm just refreshing away. Let's have a just quick look at their decks as well while we're waiting for it to happen. So Farbs, of course, has that Miracle Rogue in that back mix, has the Priest and the Warlock. Jake the Dog on the other side has the Imp King Warlock, the Quest Hunter, and of course the Aggro Druid, or the Aggro Beast Druid. But what's really interesting on this mix is that the bans have come through. Farbs is not going to be able to use the Warlock. On the flip side, though, the Hunter has been banned away by Jake the Dog will not have access to his Hunter. So very aggro decks are only going to be on the arsenal here for Jake the Dog.
Yeah, and I mean, I can't really blame it, right? If you were Jake, would you not also be banning out the Warlock after what just happened to you? I feel like that's like such a classic thing to see. It's like, right, I just got done over by this deck real dirty. I'm just gonna ban it next time. I don't want to see it. I don't care what my matchup against this Priest or this Rogue is like. I'm just gonna craft my own destiny, find my own way. And look, I don't think it's a bad play either, right? This Rogue deck is frightening, but you can just kind of like overcome what it puts on the board, especially if we've seen some people have some very early and effective Sinstone graveyards. That is not always the case. You can't just always pull it. This deck does kind of suffer from not having that many actual minions sometimes, and I just wonder when we're going to see one of these players actually punished for it.
True, very true in that sense.
Not this game though. This game, Sinstone Graveyard showing up every time.
Ready to play in that sense there, so nice to have that little thing. I can't remember the last time I saw a Paladin. I don't think anyone's actually run Paladin in this tournament. Nope. Or if they have, it's been either banned or we just haven't had the opportunity to actually put some screen time.
It's a pretty awkward class at the moment, it seems like, right? Like of the of the ways you can play that, like the Quest Paladin is just not favored at all against anything control like. It kind of just gets outscared. It's kind of like this Beast Token Druid, but it's not as fast, which I think ultimately, when you're an aggro deck, is a disadvantage, whatever other advantages you might claim to have. And then the other Paladin deck that people seem to play is Pure Paladin, which part of me wonders whether the reasons for not seeing that are just a combination of people don't like playing it. Like, you remember the Paladin decks that were around in the meta last time we were running this open Mendrix, how slow, how ponderous they were, how grueling it would be to play that for a whole tournament bracket, right? And now they're not even like as good as they were at the time. And also you need an entire deck of Paladin cards because of how the mechanic works. And I just don't know that everyone has that crafted, right? Like, it's an unspoken factor in a lot of these team compositions. You just, you know, are you going to go out there and craft all these like epic Paladin cards that only work in one deck that is not that fun to play and maybe not even the best? No, you're going to play Skeleton Mage or Token Druid that costs the same amount of dust as one card, you know?
Yeah, true, very true. These are all, you know, interesting points that you bring up in this idea. I mean, that being said, I know it's not the Paladin here. I just saw the Paladin and was like, man, I haven't seen Paladin
No,
for a
yeah,
while.
you did not say, oh wow, look, the Paladin. I don't remember that in the lineup. Like, we're over it now. We're good now. We're good.
We're good.
We
We're
get it.
100% good. We understand this is not a Paladin.
We're so smart.
Okay, guys, we know this is not a Paladin. That being said, though, of course, I think finally now the Masquerade will be revealed here. As you can see, the Shroud of Concealment thinking about coming down here now for Farbs here, and he's going to drop it here, so he's going to actually play that out. Look, it's a Rogue. Oh my god, who thought? Who knew at this moment in time?
I, for one, was deceived.
You were deceived? Oh,
yeah,
fair enough.
I was
well, there you go.
Actually, I mean, it might be Farbs getting roost here. Look at that Trog trigger, right? Like,
yeah,
this is the deck where I really like the Trog, because I find that mostly what this card is a ticket into getting like board trapped where you can't play any more minions. But as we just covered, this is the desired end state of the Token Druid. So now we're going to have to try and address this with the nulls. But can you actually retrieve it from this far? Okay, 2 nulls you probably can. Never mind. Shroud of Concealment's a pretty good card, eh?
Yeah, it's really good. You can see that bringing those up is really nice.
Just easily salvage this game.
Brings it back to a point where, oh, okay, I'm not going to die immediately. But Jake the Dog has no hesitation there to throw down that Pride's Fury on curve. Going to be a very strong, vicious Slither Spear there on its back end as well. And you can see straight to the face seems to be the option. Who cares about some nulls on the board here? Maybe I might see some trade out come across here. Of course, that Jerry Reed Carpenter can trade relatively favorable into one of these. Of course, has the option to actually just take out one of the White Pornos. Yeah, it's going to be the weakened one at the back end there, so at least it's going to have a little bit of extra board control, but most of that damage going to face, so Farbs now on a bit of a clock.
Yeah, I mean, you assume you're on a clock from the very first turn against this sort of deck. It doesn't really do anything else, but you hope the clock is slow or even potentially stopped and broken and in need of urgent repair. This is like the most finely oiled, like, Swiss mechanism, runs for 1,000 years, never loses a second. This is actually like correcting the natural dimensional aspect of time. Like, I love Naga Slither Spear as well, right? Like, this is why when I said actually the cheaper version of the deck might be better, right? You can be playing expensive rare druid cards instead of these like neutral minions, but look how much value they're getting. Like, just having more 1-drops, and especially 1-drops that can scale up in damage, right? Anything that can kind of outperform its own modest cost is exactly what you're looking for in this deck, and that is what Jake the Dog is showing up with right now.
You can see Farbs there wants to get a nice and juicy ghost onto the board. Maybe not the juiciest, it's a 5/5, still a relatively strong body here, but coming back around, we still have, you know, some pretty good stuff here. The Pride's Fury still available, the Fertilizer also going to be in play there. You can, even though it's only 3 minions, you're still going to give them some pretty big power on the back end. You can see the Pride's Fury coming down, these bigger minions now. It is very massive saplings, and Farbs goes, nah, this is no longer for me. I don't want to be here anymore, understanding that Lethal is basically just around the corner and decides to drop out of this race. But Farbs still has an opportunity to claw it back, still needs to of course get a reverse sweep and win the next 2. But Jake the Dog looking pretty good, might just be able to get that qualification.
Yeah, great to see Jake, as we sort of hope to see, bouncing back. Unfortunate for Farbs. I mean, like, I shouldn't have said it, Mendrix. I don't want to be the caster cursor here. Like, the matchups just look, we'll say, volatile, right? they could explode. So we've had one blow up in the face of 4 Farbs, and now we're going back to not the Warlock but the Priest. So the deck we haven't seen thus far, and it is going to be. I don't know if you call this Naga Priest or Buff Priest. That's one of those like very finicky lines between archetypes. We're combining the buff cards, especially Serpent Wig, with the Naga cards. Priestess Volish. Like, this is a deck that is kind of like it's another very aggressive deck with a couple of cards that massively multiply the value of the rest of them. But as with that Imp deck, if you only draw the kind of like piddly imps and not Impending Doom, not Vile Library, not Imp King, like the value multipliers, you kind of just have a bad aggro deck. And I think the one time that we saw this sort of Priest, that is what we got. Hoping for better results from Farbs, if only to show off what it can do. Actually,
Farbs opted for the Rogue once again.
Was I? Yeah.
You were, yeah. I mean, it was interesting.
Okay, all right. I was really hoping it would be the Priest. I looked away for a second and to check out the deck list, and we went back to the Rogue.
God.
So
look at
fair
this.
enough.
He's got like some pretty big cards on hand here. He's got 2 Shady Bartenders already in hand here, and he's already put up a pretty big board. Yeah, he's dealt some damage to himself to get those imps out, but yeah, Farbs already starting to feel a bit of the pressure here from Jake the Dog. Is just saying, yeah, let me just start dropping down my imps. The Wild Cornell is coming down nice and early. Both of them are coming down very quick as well, just to sort of deal with this extra damage. This extra damage that's coming into the mix, and the Shroud of Facilities, of course, also coming down as well to bail Farbs out of this pressure.
Yeah. I mean, I'm glad to see it, because if Farbs wins, then we actually be able to see that Priest deck I was talking about, and it'll make it seem like my tirade was a little bit more relevant. I just love the Priest. If people haven't listened to our cast before, that's my class. That speaks to what I love to do in card games.
Did you love it the last time we had Priest up on board?
I mean, like, it's unpopular to say so, but yes.
Yeah, there you go.
It's weird, right? Because like one thing I will shout out Hearthstone for, even among other card games that I play, they do a really good job of making all these classes quite diverse, right? For a card game where you are not allowed to go and put like warrior cards in your priest deck, just to change it up and do something different and cool. But even within each class, like, such options exist, and they're very clever about designing cards that are very flexible about going in different archetypes, and sometimes doing completely different things. So, you know, this buff priest is very, very different to how the quest priest works. They still share some of the same cards. That's pretty enticing to a player who likes to deck build. But yeah, obviously, we may not get to see any of that depending on how this goes, but Farbs is able to summon up a 5/5 Ghost, as we discussed before. Really important to the deck that you do get to use Sinstone Graveyard as more of a tempo tool when you're forced onto the defensive like this. So, you know, with any luck, we will see this rogue bounce back here. Taunt Voidwalker, we saw how important that can be just limiting your opponent's options. It's almost like your best form of interaction in this super aggressive Warlock deck. So, yeah, potentially going to be a sort of weird, like, straw breaking the camel's back kind of thing. You don't expect, wow, that 1/3 taunt really got me. But if it diverts the attack of your 5/5 Ghost from the face, it costs you a turn on your clock, that can be the game breaker.
Absolutely, and I think what's interesting here as well is that, again, we've got two Shady Bartenders there just waiting in the background to be dropped here by Jake the Dog, which of course is going to do a pretty decent amount of damage. You do need to just clear away this board, and that Voidwalker is actually in position stopping this from happening. That's a really rough moment here, that moment in time. What's also pretty frustrating is that even if you do take out the Voidwalker, you still have to deal with the fact, or perhaps you have to deal with the fact that there's a piggyback imp there, right? So that even if you kill this imp, it's going to summon another one. Even if you deal with this Voidwalker, and you can see like everything that's happening here now, just trying to clear the board, understanding that these Shady Bartenders could come down, or some other form of board refill that really can just be buffed up straight off the back of everything here. Mischievous imp there. Do you think I reckon at this point I'd still drop the Mischievous Imp? I wouldn't drop down a Shady Bartender.
I'd trade the Bartender.
Trade one of the Bartenders.
These plays all
trade
suck.
One of them.
You at least trade the first one, right? You might trade the second. I mean, okay, we're going for just the play, right? Like, you go for the clear. That's very conservative. When your opponent has 4 cards, like, this is Miracle Rogue, right? If they have 1 card in hand and it's Edwin, or it's Concealing Shroud that finds Edwin, like, you aren't the purpose of getting board control as the Imp King Warlock deck is to press damage to face. If you're just trading and not getting damage out at the same time, and you don't have like some sort of very obvious recovery mechanism in hand, I'd be worried about how it goes for you. And yeah, I don't know. This is not the same as the Warlock deck where leaving that Ghost on board to attack is going to multiply the damage that you take suddenly. Like, it's a 5/5. It's pretty much going to stay a 5/5. What you're worried about is what cards in your opponent's hand might add to their clock, and you can't do anything about those except go really fast yourself. So I don't think you're ever improving your odds by trading off collateral on board like that when you could be digging for an actual solution or something to apply, you know, Imp King, whatever, right?
Absolutely. Well, you can see Farbs is actually really thinking through this line very effectively as well. He's going to trade a little bit of life there to at least get rid of the Imp there for the time being. We can see there's still going to be a 4/4 body available here for Jake the Dog. That's a nice big Sinstone off the back end as well. That graveyard will disappear for the time being, but being left with a 5/5 and a 3/2 is still pretty good considering where we are in this game. We've got an aggro deck down to 13 life against a Miracle Rogue on 20 at turn 6. Definitely looking very nice on that side there. Jake the Dog has an Imp Gang boss, and a Mischievous Imp can come off the back end, more Shady Bartenders as well, so it's going to be interesting to see what he decides to do there. He's going to trade away that Bartender. Gets that Wicked Shipment instead as well. We'll just like throw that one down there once, of course, get that extra one to the back end. He just doesn't have it.
No. I mean, you could have traded the shipment, I guess, but at that point you're sort of like mentally calculating what cards save you. You're running very low, right? If you have 4 mana, right, you could trade into the card that makes multiple Void Walkers, a Demonic Assault, right?
Yeah.
But even then, I think you depending on what's in your opponent's hand, you could easily still be dead, and you have to factor in the sort of frustration or morale at that point. Really having a very unfortunate draw there, Jake the Dog, and I mean it can happen to anybody with any deck, but yeah, rough to see it scupper that for you because your opponent even that was one of the worst Edwins we've seen, right? That was kind of the worst.
It was a very lackluster Edwin.
You hit like the other card in your deck that costs more than 3 or costs more than 2, right? And it didn't even matter. Sinstone Graveyard on turn 2 is just too strong.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it is going to be that Priest. We finally do get the opportunity to see how this one plays out. Definitely an interesting Priest. I understand there's like buff Priest coming into the mix, but a bit different to the normal buff Priest that we've seen. Normally they have that vicious Slither Spin into the mix as well. So I'm wondering how this is going to play out for Farbs. Of course, Jake the Dog is still running the same Warlock deck and needs to win with that one to close out this tournament, but I have to see what's going to be the next play here for Farbs because I'm not sure how this actual Priest deck plays out.
Yeah, I'm a little curious as to as you said, the lack of the Slither Spear seems like really significant because it is quite synergistic with the rest of the deck. But I suppose at some point you really want to be chaining your spells together, and it seems like Farbs has gone from like just sort of being more able to sustain a game plan because this is the deck. Like, I don't think we've seen it win. And maybe we've seen it win one game in the whole Open so far. This is the deck that runs out of gas the fastest, hands down, more so even than the Druid, right? You're playing stuff like Desperate Prayer. You're kind of both including these cheap spells for a combo element, where you're casting a lot of spells in one turn and tempoing out a huge Naga or whatever, but also you're making room for extra draw spells, right? Like, you've got Identity Theft just because it sort of turns one card into 2. Switcheroo, the same, 2 copies of that, right? I don't think we've seen people devote those 4 slots to that in any other deck, even the controlling Priest decks, right? And we have Illuminate as well, which is, a cycling card, but, for 0 mana, discounting your next card. We've kind of got this great little card advantage package that Farbs is bringing. I don't know. I guess we'll have to wait and see. It is curious.
Yeah, it's definitely a very interesting deck in terms of how it does work out. And as you can see here, Farbs just continuing to heal up for the time being. I feel like this is a very powerful hand that Jake has actually drawn here. Has the Imp King, has the Shady Bartender, has a Fiendish Circle, already has the Vile Library out. I feel like if there was the planets aligning for a deck,
my good God,
this is literally the planets aligning for this deck.
This is the nuts, or close to it, right? Where if you have a farm in hand being, oh my God, you do. Yeah, I looked away.
That's what I was saying. He's got it all.
I was just looking at the board and I saw the Shady Bartender, and for whatever reason that short-circuited my brain, because to me, like, the Shady Bartenders are like your worst refarms. They're like budget refarm. We have refarm at home. It's this guy, right? And so I'm like, well, you've got the bartender instead of refarm, so it could be slightly better.
You're both right.
You have the bartender into refarm as a curve.
It's just ridiculous. Like, I mean, it's actually so tough, and I don't think Farbs has an answer right now. You can see he's thinking through what needs to be. Is it literally just a tap to heal myself, and that's it? Like, you're about to take an insane amount of damage. Yeah. He's got a coin next one. He can literally go coin into the shady bartender.
You have to feel insanely hard done by here, right? Because, like,
look at this.
I mean, you could. Can you not cast Shadow Devour on?
Look at this.
Yeah, that's.
This
so
is nuts.
You could have cleared the imps, right? You could cast Shadow Devour on your opponent's, say, their Voidwalker if you don't want to buff their large imp any higher, and it steals 1 health from all other minions, and it should kill the imps. I'm pretty sure that's enemy targetable. But, yeah, by leaving them on board, I guess you're gambling. Well, maybe you won't be able to play your next big thing. It's like, no, you slam the bartender. You get through this, right, and make, like, a larger Radiant Element. I don't know that that's good enough, right? Like, look how much damage you just took for holding that spell. That's what you were hoping to draw. You were like, I'm just going to draw my Shard of the Naru because I have 2 of them, and I'm entitled, am I not, to draw my tech card that is perfect for this matchup. And here we go. The combo aspect of this deck
is just big. Oh my god.
Starting to fire. Here comes Miracle Priest. And this is what we're going to do. We're going to make a 30 million power elemental, and as we've discussed before, this rogue deck doesn't have tech. It doesn't. Sorry, the rogue. What am I saying? The imp warlock deck, the refarm warlock deck, does not have tech for this situation. They don't have silencing usually.
Yeah,
they certainly don't have cards that can
starfish.
They can't shrink the enemy minion.
Yeah, that one's there to stay. That's something you just can't deal with. And of course, Farbs wants to get the HP back. Sea Giant though does come on through as well, so has opportunities, but. Yeah, the next turn here from Farbs, when he does bless, that Radiant Elemental is just going to give it so much. You can even go for the Serpent Wing directly afterwards. It needs to get a Naga in hand to really get some good value, but it's going to be a very big, very strong Radiant Elemental that you just can't deal with. I think some taunts are going to be necessary for Jake the Dog to get through this.
Yeah, I mean, Jake, you're going to feel hard done by when what happens to you. Because your opponent did just kind of like very quickly rattle off a very good sequence of draws. And I mean, you could still break through if you drew like a taunt at the right time here. If you only have 1 large minion on your opponent's side of the board, you are vulnerable to being like beaten by taunts. But of course, with the second shard now in hand, that's less likely as well. You're kind of relying on Refarm at this point to save you from a very large Radiant Elemental in it, as well as your life lead, right? The fact that your opponent doesn't have lethal on you, even if this is a very, very big minion, does kind of limit it, right? Because, like, you think, oh, I've got an 8/8 in Radiant Elemental, that's terrific, that's going to 2-shot you. But if all it's doing is, like, killing a medium-sized imp every turn so that you don't literally lose the game, it kind of feels like they don't have an 8/8 Elemental anymore. That being said, you've got a couple of extra minions right there. Farbs has some dangerous cards still in hand. Really trying to think about the best way to use them, though. Don't get carried away.
Yeah, and it is a bit of a thought process here as well, because I mean, that silence coming down now is really only going to get rid of the big damage there from the Voidwalker. That Imp Gang is still going to have the 2. Yeah, he's thinking about it, as you can tell. Okay, he's going for the buffs now. Here comes a Bless. This is gonna be a big card. 22. He's got a 2-turn lethal in the sense here as well.
Silence just to shrink your board a little bit. Wow. The boldness of this play, just calculating it, just thinking, well, I mean, this is actually, it's less boldness because it's a calculated risk, and like with a slide rule and an abacus, like this is so calculated. We just said what we know about the Imp Warlock deck is that its ability to boost its lethal is very limited. I'm sure that you were just sitting there counting, well, what are the odds that they kill me this turn? They'd have to have, what, Imp King Refarm infused in hand since the start of the game?
He's down one
short.
One short. Wow. Even Jake the Dog saying extraordinary off the back end here as well.
Yeah, but Farbs is just like, yeah, don't worry, bro, I counted. Like, I can read card text on the internet and say, like, that's the thank you comes out there. That's heartbreaking for Jake the Dog to miss out by so slim a margin, but very well played by Farbs to not blink in the face of an overwhelming Warlock start, and I guess just kind of show off maybe why the Warlock deck has stumbled a little bit. Like, that Priest deck obviously is kind of set up to beat the Warlock deck, I think, with all the stars. I think we even commented that last time we saw it, but still, brutal to see those shards come out like that at the exact right
that shard, if there was any other card than that shard at that moment in time, it would have been Jake the Dog's victory. That's, like you said, this were explosive decks, right? Like, the whole concept of what could have happened just blew up on the sense of that there. So that was definitely one of those ones that could have been, it was a coin flip, right? And it was so close to landing, just on the edge of that tip. So very impressive work there overall. I mean, that being said, that's literally the competition for the Western Conference. They're done and dusted. We have who it's going to be Farbs. They're taking second place. Of course, Jake the Dog was unable to qualify through the Western Conference, but still has an opportunity to qualify via the High School Conference. So that's still an opportunity there. But overall, in terms of what's being said there, have you got anything you want to add to this part before we do go to what's going to be a very long break?
Well, no, not really. I'd like to apologize to Farbs for... I didn't outright say it was a misplay, but I was, like, doubting for a moment there when we didn't see the clear on the board of imps. I thought that's insanely brave for anyone to take that risk. And then to see it punished as well by the follow-up with the bartender. But Farbs was right. It was worth holding everything to make the world's largest Radiant Elemental. Of course, you just need to know that Shard of the Narrow is right on top of the deck to cancel out the opposing buffs and make it possible to close the board. So, that again, started just how we just applauded our previous qualifier, Farbs, showing that they have what it takes to strut their stuff in the challenger stage, despite it being a relatively short bracket today. Shout outs to both qualified players.
Absolutely in that sense. A big congratulations to Blitz and Farbs, who are walking away with the $50 and $25 prizes, and of course qualifying through to our finals position. That being said, guys, we will be closing the stream out here, but of course we will have a bit more action later on in the day at 2 p.m. We will have the high school conference coming into the mix. We'll get the opportunity to see Jake the Dog once again. Before we do close it out, I do want to have a quick shout out again, once again, to our sponsors. Of course, McDonald's Australia, giving us all of the highlights today. Make sure you let us know in future competitions and future tournaments. I am loving it in chat to make sure that all of your favorite moments throughout the day are captured, and we will play them once again for you in AEO socials. And of course, Mate and Internet Mobile, who will continue to give away some valued card packs at $3.95 throughout the competition. So make sure you jump in there, show them some love by saying hashtag Let's Be Mates, and of course upgrading your internet and mobile with Mate. That's everything from us for the time being. We should be back a little bit later at 2 p.m. So guys, have yourself a good lunch break.